Welcome to the Psychological Counseling 2 module. Your course code is PC20D2. My name is S. Dube and I'm going to be your presenter for this module. First, let's look at the course content. What is contained in this module? So this module looks at the fundamentals of psychology, of sex, and Asian cultures, adolescent and sexual development, fundamentals of modern psychological counseling practices, ethics codes and practice guidelines for counseling, modern HIV counseling interventions, brief overview or brief review of VCT. It used to be called VCT, but now we are calling it HIV counseling. So it's SCT, not VCT anymore. Couple HIV counseling and testing, provider-initiated counseling and testing PITC, prevention with positives. Providing an HIV test result, the psychological effects, counseling guidelines of the Ministry of Health and Social Services, counseling needs for specific groups, that's children, sex workers, rape victims, and survivors. Creating community awareness groups. Learning outcomes, meaning what it is that we want students to be or to become at the end of this module. We want students to develop knowledge on counseling guidelines according to Ministry of Health, develop knowledge on fundamentals of psychology of sex in the Asian sexual cultures, the fundamentals of modern psychological counseling practices, the importance of adolescents and their sexual development in the era of HIV. So you should know all these things. You should develop knowledge about this. In view of the fact that currently we do have approximately 19,000 adolescents living with HIV, and they do have very specific challenges related to HIV and AIDS. We want children to develop the knowledge on the modern HIV counseling interventions, couples counseling, HIV testing, provider-initiated counseling testing, prevention with positives. We also want them to develop the knowledge on the importance of ethical codes and practices in counseling, and also to develop knowledge on the psychological effects on HIV results on the individual. You must remember that HIV has got being tested HIV positive has got a long-term effect on the person's life, and how do you deal with that as a counselor? And also we want students to develop a knowledge of information and skills on how to develop counseling programs for children, sex workers and rape victims or rape survivors, and how to create community awareness in public, private and NGOs on care, support and referrals for counseling services. Introductory overview. This module obviously is basically meant or tailor-made for you as second-year students, and we'll be looking at the counseling guidelines as indicated by the Ministry of Health and Social Services. And we'll be looking at the fundamentals of psychology, the ethical codes of practices, the 4 modeling counseling approaches, and also we'll be looking at the psychological effect of being tested HIV positive, and also some counseling needs for very specific groups, right? One thing that I must also stress is that HIV counseling is very important if we are to reduce new infections and empower people with knowledge and skills to live with HIV. Counseling contributes greatly to the comprehensive delivery of care. Discussing the fundamentals of counseling in Asian cultures gives us a background to current day-to-day behavior patterns and the risks involved in adolescence. And also examining modern counseling approaches is of utmost importance to let students experience the developments made in addressing the multifaceted problems faced when living with HIV. Counseling in HIV can no longer only work with individuals on a voluntary basis. Therefore, the approach of counseling initiated provider in the healthcare setting, counseling couples, and involving people living with HIV in the design of approaches towards improved action. While these approaches may sound new and indeed may not have taken root in Africa, it requires adoption by healthcare providers, and communities should be informed so as to utilize services more effectively. The need to develop an understanding of issues involved in counseling children, sex workers, and rape victims or survivors are important, and therefore the importance of examining these issues in more detail. Community mobilization for counseling still remains an aspect of great concern. What I also want to say that as much as this module will give you the theoretical framework and so forth, it is very important that you as a student currently undertaking HIV management, you do a specific course in counseling or in basic counseling with organizations such as Lifeline, Childline Namibia, or Philippi Trust. You will get some very practical training skills which will enable you to have an edge ahead of your colleagues, but also create opportunities for you in terms of employment and so on. And most importantly, one has to fight very hard to even undergo what we call rapid testing training, which is offered by Ministry of Health. These two certificates, in addition to your degree, are going to really create numerous opportunities than you have ever imagined. Let's look at assignments. As indicated before in other modules, you are required to do assignments of high quality with a lot of detail into it. So assignment 1. The psychological changes, including sexual urges experienced by adolescents, increases the risk of HIV. Discuss. So in order for you to attempt this module very clearly, you need to go back to those theoretical frameworks and really read very hard and understand, consult vast literature from online journals and also from your module. Assignment 2, receiving an HIV positive test result is a life-changing event. Elaborate on the psychological effect it may have on an individual and discuss the specific interventions required during the counseling session. So again, you really need to have a good understanding of this module by reading quite extensively around issues of testing and also receiving an HIV positive result and what can be done. Because most of you, as much as you are HIV manager, some of you could work as HIV counselors and you'll be dealing with these issues on a day-to-day basis. So how do you give the results and how do you support this person? Assignment 3, review the counseling guidelines by the Ministry of Health and Social Services, outline and discuss the main components. So you need to first and foremost acquaint yourself with the counseling guidelines which are offered by Ministry of Health, and also look at the key areas. So it requires you to really get a copy. Some of these copies, they are readily available online. And I've always said, work with your librarians. Librarians have got all the knowledge and skills to assist you to get all the information that you need as a student. Assignment 4, counseling for HIV prevention requires multiple prevention interventions to reduce infections and empower communities. Discuss. Like I said earlier, counseling is a very important component of HIV prevention, treatment, care, and support. And therefore, you need to ensure that you are first and foremost acquainted with multiple prevention interventions, and also help these people to make sure that through these interventions, you're able to empower those communities to cope with living with the virus. Okay. Lastly, my contact details rather, they are readily available in all your tutorials. and you are more than welcome to contact me should you face any challenges. But more importantly, I'll encourage you to read widely. And I wish you all the best in all your endeavors as you take on this very exciting journey ahead.